Hey there, I'm Lee Ullman here with some big news from the National Young Farmers Coalition. We're partnering with Heritage Radio Network on a special season of The Farm Report. It's all about what's happening with the Farm Bill and how it impacts farmers and eaters.
I am growing diversified vegetables on land that's been in our family for 150 years.
And so with the pandemic, gentrification, property values going up, we had to sell the land and we lost it.
Join us as we uncover the untold stories behind this massive piece of legislation that shapes how we grow our food, what we eat, and so much more.
The problems we have had, those are things that come from earlier Farm Bill and USDA policy, right? Like Earl Butz, get big or get out.
You know, it's my responsibility to know not only what I'm eating, but then like how that all came to be. And realize like, wow, like this piece of legislation, all this money, like it's technically something that I support as a taxpayer.
While Congress debates the next Farm Bill, this is not just an invitation to listen. It's a call to action. Be part of the conversation. Subscribe to the Farm Report on Heritage Radio Network, wherever you listen to podcasts.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network. HRN is food radio supported by you. Learn more at heritageradionetwork.org.
This episode is brought to you by Roberta's, home of Heritage Radio Network for 10 years. Learn more about Roberta's at robertaspizza.com.
Welcome to Spill and Dish, a podcast from the Specialty Food Association. Founded in 1952, SFA is the leading trade association and source of information about the $175 billion specialty food industry. We champion the food producers, retailers, and other buyers who make up the specialty food world. Each episode, we want to share the stories behind the products made and sold by our members who are helping shape the future of food. You can listen and discover the inspiration, recipe, craft, culture, ingredients, and production methods that help answer the question, what makes specialty food special? I'm today's host, Julie Gallagher, Content Director at SFA. We're excited to bring you today's episode and so happy to be working with Heritage Radio Network, a nonprofit podcast network covering the worlds of food, drink, and agriculture, and expanding the way eaters think about food. Today's guest is Dani Zuchovicki, member and community manager at the Hatchery, an incubator with 54 private kitchens and one shared commercial space. Since joining, she's helped hundreds of entrepreneurs navigate the business of food. She's also the winner of the Specialty Food Association's 2023 Leadership Award for Emerging Leader. Welcome, Dani. I'm so pleased to be speaking with you today.
Thank you, Julie. I'm happy to be here.
Great, and congratulations on winning such a prestigious award.
Thank you so much. Yes, I'm still in shock and overjoyed.
That's great. Before we talk about your business journey, take me back to the days of when you were cooking with your grandmother and you launched a supper club, some form of supper club in high school. Tell me about it.
Yeah, So I started cooking at a really young age. My grandmother, who she was a Holocaust survivor, and she would be always cooking. Like she would host dinner parties and would always be so excited to showcase like all these dishes from her homeland that she wasn't able to really recreate because of all the, diaspora and having to move from place to place. So she was born in Budapest and then lived in Vienna, and then under the Nazi regime moved to Paris briefly, then under the Vichy regime moved to Morocco, where she was in a camp for like a few months, and then made her way to Argentina. And that's where she settled down, and those were her roots. And so really it was her longing for those tastes and those flavors from when she was a child. And then also having more incorporation with Argentinian cuisine. And in Argentina, there's a lot of Italian flavors as well, because there was a big group of Italians who migrated there. And then when we made our way to the United States, my mom is from Mexico and my dad was born in Argentina and then moved to Mexico at a very young age. Our house was full of different flavors. And so every meal was always something new, something different. It wasn't the traditional American staple. My lunches were always very unique. When My Big Fat Greek Wedding came out, that movie, there's that scene where she pulls out the Tupperware of moussaka and all the girls giggle because it sounds like moose caca. And that resonated with me because my mom would do similar things. She would send us Tupperwares. We never got like the sandwiches or like the gushers and things that all these kids
all the
got
crap.
to eat. Yeah. And so I started actually making my own lunches, and then I got to watch my grandmother make so many cool dishes. So I would sit there watching her in the kitchen, and then finally at like, I think 7 or 8, I ended up asking her, can I help? And that's where she was like, oh, I've been waiting for this day, please. And like grabbed a stool and started making me do all the things she did not like to do.
Okay, you had
So,
to
like,
start at the bottom.
Right, getting my hands into things and stuff like that. And then that allowed me to just continue being curious, you know. The Food Network was out, and so I would watch so much Ina Garten, so much Barefoot Contessa, so much Giada and Rachel Ray, and I would try all these things at home, to the point where my mom would just be like, I'm going to buy groceries and you figure it out. You've got all the meals for us. Because my mom I love her, but she's not a very good cook. She does some things very, very well, but for the most part, it's not her favorite thing. And so she would have me after school, she would call because she would be running errands or doing stuff. And she would say, Dani, I need you to pull the chicken out. And then I'd be like, got it, understood. And she was like, okay, you've got it from here. I'll see you closer to dinner. And then I would have dinner on the table. And then in high school is when, you know, all the people were like starting to party and like, you know, wanted to like go out and stuff. And my parents lovingly said, no, you can't go to these parties. No, you shouldn't do these things. So what I ended up doing was inviting my friends over for dinner. So trying to do all these new recipes that I wanted to do and wanted to learn. Some were really great, some were really bad, but they were really good, jumping off points. And so that's where I was able to do these supper clubs with them.
That's really brave at that age. I bet you were really popular as a result.
I don't know about that, but certainly we were all well fed.
Okay. And then tell me about what you studied in college.
Yeah. So I went to Franklin University in Switzerland. So my junior year of high school, I actually studied abroad in France. And I got to be with a host family. And another great moment that allowed me to connect with my host mom was cooking. So she would be in the kitchen, and I would feel really terrible because I'd be not able to really speak a lot of French, and I'd kind of be like sitting there and I'd say, can I help you, in my broken French at the time? And she would absolutely say, yes, please help me. And she would show me how to do, you know, all these sauces, all these dressings, and helping her make French style meals and for dinner. And that actually helped me with my French. But from there, I decided I need to live in Europe. That's where I want to go. I don't want to be in the States. And that's where I applied to Franklin University. But around my sophomore year, that's when I dedicated my background to cultural or comparative literature and cultural studies. But school was not for me. School was really hard. And I actually I took a class called the Cultures of Class and Cuisine. And it was with an amazing professor. Her name is Sarah Steinert-Barella, and she taught you about all the foundational things about gastronomy. So terroir, and, you know, how do we understand the taste of place, and then reading a whole bunch of things that in my mind, I had no idea that people were writing about food like this, you know, something that I loved for so long. And then I started reading Anthony Bourdain's memoir of Kitchen Confidential.
Okay.
And that's when I realized I need to go to culinary school. What am I doing here? Like, I should not be doing this. So I actually, at my sophomore year, I left and took a year in between and ended up working at an Italian restaurant. It's a chain called Biaggi's. And my parents had just moved to Iowa. So from California to Iowa, very shocking. Lots of culture shock. But there I was able to start off as a host, and then I made my way through the restaurant because I wanted to learn everything about the restaurant. And so they even let me have a line cook position. And so I was able to start working the line and being able to understand from garde manger to, the hot side. And that's when I applied to the Culinary Institute of America.
So was that your goal, to become a cook at that restaurant when you first started there, or were you just willing to do whatever?
I was willing to do whatever. Honestly, at that point, I was looking for something to do because my parents were like, if you're not going to go to college, like, you need to figure something out, like, what's happening here. And so that's where I just got this host job, and I loved it. I loved everything. I loved watching how the restaurant flowed, how you engage with customers and really create an experience. And then I started trying things at my own house after seeing it on the menu and like bypassing things in the restaurant. Like whenever we moved things from the past, I'd see how the line cooks were doing it. And so then I started applying a lot of those things at home. And I was like, I can do this. Let's figure it out.
Yeah, that's great. And then you went to the Culinary Institute? Okay.
Yeah. That's where I studied culinary arts as my associates, and I loved it. I loved the CIA. I loved Hyde Park, New York. That's where I was on the New York campus, which is literally the Hogwarts of the culinary space. Like, oh my gosh, like you walk in there and there's Farquharson Hall, which literally feels like the dining room in Hogwarts, except for like the ceiling isn't like, a starry sky. But it was so cool. You've got all these people walking around in their chef whites, and then, they have a strict uniform where you're either in your chef whites or in business casual. And I hate business casual or business professional. Like, I hate wearing anything that isn't leggings, to be quite honest, or chef pants, really. And so I'd always be in my chef whites, and it was amazing because you get to learn all the fundamentals, but then also you got to experience all these different types of cuisines. So like you do cuisines of the Americas, cuisines of Asia's, cuisines of the Mediterranean. Now they incorporated cuisines of Africa, which I wish I had that then, but I'm really glad that they brought it into their curriculum. So it was a really great experience, and it led me to Chicago because I got to extern at Chef Stephanie Izard's Girl in the Goat.
Okay.
And I got to work with her, and, that was also an amazing experience of, high volume fine dining.
Did you wear a lot of hats there, or what specifically did you do?
That one, I started as a prep cook, and then within like a week, they do all of their butchering in-house. Wow. And I don't know if many people are familiar with Stephanie Izard's menu and what she chooses for her meats, but she does from, offals, so like your sweetbreads and like your beef tongue and things like that, to, pretty standard cuts as well. She has an amazing pork shank dish on her menu, but also the one that's like iconic is the pig's face. And so they would receive whole pig heads, and there were like, I think over 100 every week, and you would just see all the butchers just like fabricating those pig heads right then and there, and getting it started on the process. And I remember that was the day when I saw the first shipment. I said, I want to be a butcher. I want to learn how to do this. Okay. And so I asked, and that's where I was able to, start off in that space. And I got to learn so much about fabrication from not only like, your beef and pork, but also like fish fabrication, and then how to prepare them so that way it's all edible too. Okay. And then I worked the line as well.
That sounds amazing. So how did you end up at the Flowered Apron?
Oh, yes. The Flowered Apron was a nonprofit organization that was a job training program for women from underserved communities. So after I had worked in several restaurants, I was burnt out. Like most chefs, you know, it's a really unsustainable model, and it's low pay, long hours. You know, you are passionate for a long period of time doing it. However, the more you force the line cooks and those who are responsible for preparing those meals to work these really hard hours under extreme conditions, that spark, you know, can go out. And that's what happened to me. And so I ended up going and starting to work as a culinary manager for a local kids culinary school in Chicago. I developed their curriculum and helped them teach 18-month-olds to teenagers on how to cook. And that was so fun because I got to take a step back from really the high pressure kitchen and then starting from scratch, you know, trying to find why I loved cooking again. And it was really fun to be able to watch these kids experience food for the first time. And so I had a lot of experience of building out that curriculum. And then there was this nonprofit that's put out a search for a culinary manager and instructor. So then I ended up jumping at that opportunity and started teaching these incredible women how to bake. And really setting a path for them so that way they could have secure employment, because a lot of them have come from really hard backgrounds where, you know, they weren't given an opportunity, or they were just at the wrong place at the wrong time, and it, you know, trajected their whole career or really their life in general. And so that's where I was able to work with them to teach them about baking. But then I also, not only was I their instructor, I was their social worker. I was, you know, their confidant. I was their resources. I remember vividly that I actually ended up taking one of my students to Planned Parenthood to get an abortion. And, you know, helping her navigate that because, you know, she didn't want to do it, but she had to. That was the only choice she had. And then also, you know, being there for them when no one else would. And we were actually in the process of getting into more accounts and like building more sales, because as a nonprofit for what we did, it was really unsustainable to constantly be fundraising. And so we needed a steady stream of revenue. And unfortunately, you know, for all of the things that I was trying to get us to do so that way we could have like our granola in stores, or, you know, do more catering and baked goods for people, because we had all of the students making these amazing cakes and cookies and bars. So if we could sell them so that way we could raise more funds to support these amazing women and continue the program, it could have been possible. But our board unfortunately decided that, you know, it wasn't worth the work to do. So that's when they decided to close the Flower and Apron, and so we had to shut our doors, and it was probably one of the hardest experiences. No matter how many kitchens I've worked in where you're in, you know, high temperatures, high stakes, high pressure, those were not comparable to this experience, because it was so many women that we were unable to serve anymore.
Right. Okay. So where did you go from there? How did you wind up at the Hatchery?
So I was very lost because I really didn't know what to do next, you know. And I had heard about the Hatchery because of some of the things that I was trying to launch with our nonprofit, the Flower and Apron, and I was looking on their website to see what classes that they had going on, because maybe that would spark some innovation or like some idea for me of where to go. And then I ended up seeing that they had this role to join them. So I applied, and I met with Natalie Schmulik, who's the Chief Strategy and Incubation Officer. And she and I had an interview that I had never had with any business before. Like, any interview I've had has always been, tell me about your work history and why you want to work here. For her, it ended up being an hour and a half conversation about food.
Okay.
Where we talked about everything from gastronomy to what is important about food. And I left feeling, oh my goodness, did I get that job? Do I have that job? Did I waste it by talking about all these things that I'm interested in? And then within within a week, I got a response from Natalie saying, I'd love to bring you on. I think you would be a great fit for the Hatchery to help us drive our mission. So I joined in July of 2019.
Okay.
And I started building a curriculum for entrepreneurs.
That's great. Now tell me, are the entrepreneurs that are taking these courses, do they already have a little bit of a business going? Are some maybe considering going into business? Tell me about how early stage these companies are.
Yes, they typically do have an idea or even a recipe. So they'll come to us because we host a monthly class called Starting a Food Business.
Okay.
And that's where it's pretty organic, where entrepreneurs will come because they'll have an idea and they want to see where to go with it. And so it's a 2-hour class where we talk about everything in the industry. So from financing and all of your production costs and really things that you need to consider before entering this amazing but costly industry, to building a brand and, what have successful brands done. And so after the 2 hours, that's where we get to actually talk with these folks who have attended the classes, and they say, this is what I want to do. Do you think this makes sense? And then we're able to have them join a program that's called the Sprouts Incubation Program. And that's where we are able to help them with the roadmap of getting from that idea to creating the prototype, getting the licenses and certificates that they need, building a business plan, and really budget towards all of their initial startup costs. And the reason we do this at the front of their business is because we've seen so many people spend their life savings on something that they don't know is going to work.
Okay.
And at the Hatchery, we're in a neighborhood that is such a beautifully untapped neighborhood of talent, but it's often overlooked by the city of Chicago. It's the West Side. And it has so many, like I said, great people that have an idea or have such deep culinary roots too. And so a lot of the things that they have to do is they have to go all the way downtown to access the resources, or they have to go into several neighborhoods that are daunting in order to be successful or to find out how they can get started. And so our reason for being on the west side of Chicago is that we wanted to bring those resources directly to them, so that way they didn't have to spend $10 going and taking a train to only pay more to get a bus to get somewhere, right? To just find the free resources that they need. A lot of them, those $10 make a difference. And so our focus is to have all this information up front for them, so that way they can see this is what needs to happen.
Okay.
And we do work with a nonprofit micro-lending organization called Allies for Community Business. They're part of our joint venture with ICNC, which is an incubator that's been around for over 50 years and has incredible knowledge in how to help, businesses grow and economic development. And that's those are two really great resources, because it helps these entrepreneurs who are on the west side have access to capital, have access to financial advising, and really have an understanding of things that aren't taught in school anymore. Like, no one talks about budgeting or, how to really understand your finances and to grow your wealth. And so that's a lot of the stuff that we get to work with people and help them understand, so that way they can have a successful food and beverage business.
Are you able to work with any of the women that you worked with at the Flowered Apron now at the Hatchery?
Yes.
Oh, that's great.
Yes, it's been really, really awesome, because when the Flowered Apron closed and I joined the Hatchery, all of my students and my graduates, they wanted to have their own businesses. That was one of their dreams. And unfortunately, especially for women of color, those resources and opportunities are very hard to find.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, raising capital for someone like, you know, a white man is relatively easy. For white women, it's still hard, but it's available. But for women of color, it's non-existent. And so for them, it was a dream, but it was only going to stay a dream. And so whenever I joined, I ended up reaching out to several of those graduates to say, hey, there's this great resource out here, and I'd love to help you to see if, you know, coming to a couple of classes. So I was able to pay for some of their classes and also provide them some hands-on guidance on how to structure their business plan. And some of them tried it, and they realize entrepreneurship is not for them, and that's okay, because being an entrepreneur is really, really hard. I did have two that ended up closing their businesses, or closing their ideas, because the businesses were just really early. But they wanted to continue, you know, helping and learning about the startup life. So they've actually worked for some of our entrepreneurs on site at the Hatchery too.
Oh, that's great. That's wonderful. So where do you come up with ideas for the curriculum? Are you getting ideas from the entrepreneurs themselves? You know, I need help in this area. Can you put something together?
Yeah, a lot of it has to do with speaking with entrepreneurs. I actually, when I first started, a lot of my topics were on things that I wanted to know when I was trying to help out the Flowered Apron. And then in that starting a food business class that we run, we get a lot of questions at the end where people are asking us, you know, well, how do I do XYZ? And those are those moments where, you know, listening to them and hearing, okay, that's an interesting topic, and no one is talking about that. So helping them navigate that as well. So a lot of it is really just leaning on the budding entrepreneurs and seeing where they'll take us with a lot of this curriculum.
What are some examples of topics that they're coming to you asking about?
So a lot of people ask us about finding a co-packer or a contract manufacturer, which then tends to open up the question of, okay, well, what is your purpose of getting a co-packer, co-manufacturer? And then they'll say, oh, well, it's because I want to get into this store and this store and this store. Oh, so you really want to be like retail ready? Yes, I want to be retail ready. Okay, well, do you have packaging for your product? No, I have no packaging. Okay, well, we need to start there, right? So we've done classes on packaging basics, as well as, you know, getting ready to retail. So, you know, helping them understand having a sell sheet, putting together a pitch deck, and as well as food safety. That is one of the biggest ones that no one ever asks questions about, because they
so
get
important, though.
Right, it's so important, but they get very excited about all the other things first. But then, you know, we have to ask them, well, do you have a food safety plan, or have you developed a HACCP plan, especially if they're in like the perishable or you know, frozen space? What are they looking to do? Anything that isn't, you know, shelf stable. So that's a lot of the classes that we'll develop as well. And then we do some classes on finances too. So, you know, how to put together a P&L, how to understand, you know, your lines of revenue, and how to seek investments as well. So really, it's a lot of classes, a lot of things that we're covering.
Okay. Can you tell me about some success stories? Are there some brands that stand out in your mind as having been particularly successful?
Yes. So while I've been there, I've been able to just see so many companies just grow. So I've had one company called Gifted Breads that she's making artisanal, delicious, gluten-free breads. And not like, your sandwich breads, like your sliced breads. Like, it's actually making baguettes and dinner rolls. And
I've tried those.
Yes.
I tasted those, I think it was at last year's winter show, and I ended up ordering a case of them because my son, he doesn't tolerate gluten. So, those are really tasty. Yes. I've tried them.
Yes, Tati is amazing. She's a phenomenal person, just human in general, but she's also so smart. And then also really solving this big problem. There aren't delicious breads out there for people with celiac disease. And so we actually were able to bring her to the Fancy Food Show with us as part of Incubator Village last year. And since then, we've seen she's been really taking off. So that's so exciting.
Yeah, I tasted the sample at the show and it was so delicious. I said I have to order these. So
yeah, no, they're
great.
so good. Another great company that we've been able to work with is AO Foods. They actually joined our Sprouts Incubator program, and that's for companies that just have an idea and then helping them really build that roadmap. So they joined in January of 2019. January of 2020, which was right before the pandemic. And they're making incredible African-inspired frozen meals. So that way they could help people really understand the beautiful flavors that are coming out of Africa. And they started with, some familiar dishes like jollof rice and egusi stew, which I'm sure I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, but those are things that you could quickly pop into your microwave. And they were one of the first frozen companies, like ready-to-eat meals that I had personally worked with. And so helping them navigate that while learning about that space was eye-opening, but so incredible. But Pertit and Fred, they are the founders, and they're a married couple, and they really just took that business and ran with it. It was incredible to see. And so they graduated our incubator program, and now at that point they had entered, I think, all of the Southwest regions of Whole Foods. And so from there, they have just been able to get into so many different retailers, and now they're working with James Beard award-winning chefs from, African backgrounds to really bring more flavors to the market. So really opening palates for people to understand African cuisine, because it's so diverse and it's so delicious. There's so many flavors there. And they're also launching lines of sauces as well too. So really, it's been incredible.
Oh, that's so great. That's wonderful. It must feel so good to help brands like that. But we're almost out of time. But before we go, I'd like you to take part in our Take 5 segment where we ask our guests 5 questions. But first, let's pause for a brief break.
This episode is brought to you by Roberta's, home of Heritage Radio Network for 10 years. Roberta's was founded in Bushwick in 2008 and has become one of the most iconic restaurants in the country. HRN made its home inside of Roberta's in 2009, and together they have become part of the DIY fabric of the neighborhood. Roberta's, the pizza restaurant, is open for lunch and dinner 7 days a week and serves much more than just the famous wood-fired pizzas. Their team dreams up new salads, pastas, and sandwiches on the regular. Roberta's Tiki Bar is alive and well in the back garden, serving up frozen drinks in the summer and hot toddies in the winter. Stop by the bakery and takeout spot next door for fresh breads, sticky buns, and pizzas to go. And of course, there's the 2 Michelin-starred Blanca tucked away in the garden for truly daring diners. But Roberta's also extends beyond Bushwick, with multiple locations in New York City and now in Los Angeles. You can also find their frozen pies in grocery stores around the country. The spirit of Roberta's, like Heritage Radio Network, is everywhere. Here's to many more years of pizza-powered radio. Learn more about Roberta's at robertaspizza.com.
Okay, so here are your 5 questions for our final segment, Take 5. What's your favorite thing about the specialty food industry?
Oh, I love the community. I love coming here and getting to meet all of the makers and all of the creative people who are really impacting change in this industry and working towards bringing innovation here. You know, one of the things I love about specialty food is that you get to taste so many different flavors from all around the world.
Mm-hmm. And what do you like most about being a Specialty Food Association member?
The access to resources. The SFA does such a great job to, you know, put together these classes, and really they're such good pieces for us from a national level to really help out on some of these topics for our entrepreneurs. So we focus primarily on like the Chicago area and things that entrepreneurs need in order to be successful. But then there's, you know, the classes like the basic series that happened on Monday, right? No. Saturday. Oh my gosh, what is time? While we were at the Fancy Food Show, it was such a good session where you have so many different topics that are so important for people who are starting a food business. And then I constantly look at the co-manufacturing directory that is put together. I know that was recently republished again in 2022, which has been awesome. It's been so helpful for a lot of our emerging brands, especially in the Midwest region, who, you know, maybe they can't keep producing out of their private kitchen in order to grow. So they need to find someone immediately to help grow their business before they build out their own manufacturing site, or if that is even something they'd like to do.
And if you weren't helping small businesses, what would you be doing?
I think I'm torn between two options.
Okay.
I mean, ideally, in the perfect world, I would be the female Anthony Bourdain and getting to travel the world and taste everything and talking about everything and meeting new people and getting to showcase cultures. But realistically, I think I would love to be an entrepreneur again and launch a business in this amazing space.
Okay, good answer. What's the one piece of advice you'd give a new food business, or do you give new food businesses?
Always ask. You always ask the question, even if in your mind, you know, you're like, should I even be asking this? Like, will they think that I shouldn't be? Always ask, because worst case scenario, they say no, or, you know, they don't have the answer for you, and that's fine. But then, you know, because some of the best things that have happened to me and to many entrepreneurs that I know is that they've asked for that help. They've asked for that contact, right? They've asked for that opportunity, and then it leads them down a path of so much success.
Mm-hmm. And how do you define specialty food?
Oh, man. Specialty food is an experience. You know, it takes you on a journey, whether it's the founder's journey, whether it's a regional journey, whether it's an ingredient journey. It's always going to be something really fun. It's going to be an experience.
Definitely. A big thank you to Dani Zuchovicki for joining us today. You can find out more about this show at specialtyfood.com and heritageradionetwork.org, and remember to follow wherever you get your podcasts. Come back often to get to know the people who are shaping the future of food. Special thanks to Dani and to Heritage Radio Network, the world's pioneer food radio station. This is Spill and Dish, a Specialty Food Association podcast.
Spill and Dish, a Specialty Food Association podcast, is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org/subscribe.